It is an extraordinary honor, and my skin is like goosebumps right now. My hair is having a party. My body is having a moment of joy to introduce you Dr. Madhurima Bhadra, joining us from Nepal right now. My dear Madhu, you are home.
Thank you so much, Clelia. And hello to everybody else. It's so. Shall I just go ahead and make my presentation, Clelia, or how should we do this?
Okay, maybe, okay, I'm going to introduce you. Um, I want to introduce you first. Um, and I'm going to, what I
Sure.
normally do is I copy and paste in the chat box so that everyone can read along a little bit about yourself. And once again, like every presenter that you have met, even this small, am I frozen? I'm frozen. I'm frozen? No. Okay. So, not now. Okay. I'm going to start reading from the chat box a little bit about this wonderful human being that is joining our circle today, our encounter, our space. Dr. Madhurima Bhadra wears multiple hats, from senior public health and gender practitioner to radio jockey to lecturer. She has over 17 years of accumulative experience as a mentor, trainer, project manager, program evaluator, policy researcher, and advocate in both development and humanitarian, sexual and reproductive health, and adolescent mental health, nutrition, social inclusion, etc. She hosted radio shows on sex and women artists from 2012 to 2015. She's also a gender and LGBTQIA advocate and believes advocacy can be expressed through theater and creation of safe spaces to share and discuss these issues. She directed and produced the Vagina Monologues in 2020. Presently, she continues lecturing on health in humanitarian situations, health policy and feminist research methods, and project program management at Kathmandu University, Tribhuvan University, and Midwestern University. She also facilitates sessions on menstrual hygiene management and sex, pleasure, and consent to adolescents and young women. And I've had the privilege of working with Madhu for a long time, and I don't know what to say right now, Madhu. I'm just like, my heart is like chuchun, chuchun, chuchun.
I know it's so good to see you after such a long time. It's been way too long.
And here we are.
And I'm so excited to be a part of this, and I'm so excited to be a part of this program.
I am so excited for you to join this bunch, because I know that it will not be the last time that you're going to see them or that you're going to hear from them, and vice versa. So I'm just
Uh-huh.
really excited.
I'm
So
very much excited for this as well.
so I'll leave you to it. However you want to do this, Madhu.
Okay, great. I thought that I would just start with the last vagina monologue piece I did in 2020, and then I will speak a little bit about like what the process of conducting the vagina monologues entailed in Nepal. So how our team did the production and what my role in directing it was. And then I also thought I could talk a little bit about the, advantages that we had by uh, producing and performing the vagina monologues here,
Yes.
but also the challenges we faced, uh, as well as a little bit about my own personal opinion about like the vagina monologues. Now it's stopped its production and things like that, so I want to talk a little
Amazing.
bit about that, and then maybe we can go into questions. And I'm happy to answer any questions about any of the work that I've been doing in Nepal. It doesn't have to be just specifically, if anybody is curious, doesn't have to be specifically just about the vagina monologues.
Okay, so since we're about to have a sneak peek, I've had the fortune of seeing you twice do this in person in Nepal. So I know that for those of you that are, if you're able to turn on your camera, this is going to be a performance the Dr. Madhurima is gonna do for us, and then you can turn them off after, only if you're okay with it. Okay, go for it.
So, okay, great. The piece is called "The Woman Who Loved to Make Vaginas Happy." I love vaginas. I love women. I do not see them as separate things. Women pay me to dominate them, to excite them, to make them come. I did not start out like this. No, no, no. To the contrary, I started out as a lawyer. But in my late 30s, I became obsessed with making women happy. It began as a mission of sorts, but then I got involved in it. I got very, very good at it. Kind of brilliant. It was my art. I started getting paid for it. It was as if I had found my calling. I wore outrageous outfits when I dominated women, lace and silk and leather, and I used props, whips, handcuffs, rope, dildos. There was nothing like this in tax law. There were no props, no excitement, and I hated those blue corporate suits, although I wear them now from time to time in my new line of work, and they serve quite nicely. There were like no props in corporate law, no wetness, no dark, mysterious foreplay, no erect nipples, no delicious mouths, but mainly there was no moaning. Not the kind that I'm talking about anyway. This was the key. I see now, moaning was the thing that ultimately seduced me and got me addicted to making women happy. I remember when I was a little girl and I used to see women in movies making love, making strange, orgasmic moaning noises. I used to laugh. I got strangely hysterical. I could not believe that big, outrageous, ungoverned sounds like that came out of women. I longed to moan. I practiced in front of my mirror on a tape recorder, moaning in various keys, in various tones, but all played it back, it sounded fake. It was fake. It wasn't rooted in anything sexual, really, only in my desire to be sexual. There was a time when I was 10 and I had to pee really badly. We were on a road trip and it went on for almost an hour. And when I finally got to pee in this dirty little gas station, it was so exciting. I moaned. I moaned as I peed, and I peed as I moaned. I could not believe it. Me moaning in a Texaco station in the middle of Louisiana. I realized then that moans are connected with not getting what you want right away, with putting things off. I realized moans were best when they caught you by surprise, when they came out of this hidden, mysterious part of you that's speaking its own language. I realized that moans were, in fact, that language. I became a moaner. It made most men anxious. Frankly, it terrified them. I was loud and they couldn't concentrate on what they were doing. They'd lose focus, then they'd lose everything. We couldn't make love in people's homes, the walls were too thin. I got a reputation in my building, and people stared at me with contempt in the elevator. Men thought I was too intense. Yeah, some called me insane. So I began to feel bad about my moaning. I got quiet and polite. I made noises into a pillow. I learned to choke my moan, hold it back like a sneeze. I began to get headaches and stress related disorders. I was becoming hopeless when I discovered how deeply excited I got when other women moaned, when I was responsible for other women moaning. I made love to quiet women, and I found this place inside them, and they shocked themselves in their moaning. I made love to moaners, and they found a deeper, more penetrating moan. It was kind of a surgery, a kind of a delicate science, finding the right tempo, the exact location, or the home of the moan. That's what I call it, the home of the moan. Sometimes I found it over women's jeans. Sometimes I've snuck up on it, off the record, quietly disarming the surrounding alarms and moving in. Sometimes I used force, but not the violent, oppressing force, more like a dominating. I'm going to take you someplace. Don't worry, lay back and enjoy the ride. That kind of force. Sometimes it was simply mundane. I found the moan before things even started, while we were eating salad or chicken, just casual, just right there with my fingers. Here it is, like that, real simple in the kitchen, all mixed up with the balsamic vinegar. Sometimes I use props. I love props. Sometimes I made the woman find her own moan in front of me. I waited, stuck it out until she opened herself. I wasn't fooled by the minor, more obvious moans. No, I pushed her further, all the way into her power moan. There's the clit moan. Oh, the vaginal moan. Oh, the combo clit vaginal moan. Oh, oh, there's the almost moan. Oh, oh, oh. Then there's the machine gun moan. Oh, 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 oh. Then there's the college student moan. I should be studying. And then there's the new bride moan. Don't, don't stop. Don't stop. Don't stop. Don't stop. Don't stop. And finally, the triple orgasm moan. Mm, ah, 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 ah. Thank you. So yeah, so that was my performance. I didn't change a whole lot of it because
Oh,
I had changed a couple of
oh, Mother! Just like when I heard it back in Nepal in front of hundreds of people. Oh my God. And this was Madhu in the center, like doing, like working the stage, doing a one solo act for like, I think you were talking for like for 2 hours. You were performing for
Well,
like two
the whole
hours.
thing was for 2 hours, but yeah, I think when you saw me, I was doing a piece that was probably about 17 minutes long. Yeah, that
Yeah,
was that was
that was the longest one that you did. Oh my
mm,
God.
yeah, yeah.
Well,
Yeah, well, doing this was fun too. It was something that I always wanted to do. Like, I thought it would be um, a fun performance to do because you kind of have to, like, get out of your own skin and just allow it to rip towards the end.
yes, and that's exactly
But
that.
yeah,
Yeah, and that's exactly where sort of like today have taken us to the body, to read the
mhm,
body in
mhm,
context of not only educating ourselves, but
mhm,
the role that we have into trying to identify how even knowing our bodies can lead to social change. So maybe you
mhm,
can start sharing
mhm.
some of your
Yes,
experience on that.
yeah, yes. Yeah, so that thank you so much, Clelia, for helping me make the segue. So, like, when we were practicing for the vagina monologue, so we would start, and usually the vagina monologues are between February 14th to March 8th. So sometime in the December of the previous year, we would actually put it out on Facebook that we're doing auditions. So anybody who's interested can like fill out a form, and then we call them for an audition. And usually our policy was that whoever came interested, we wouldn't turn them away. So no matter what they did in their audition, it was a process for us to see like which pieces we could give to them. But the audition was really not like for rejection. So if there was somebody who we thought didn't have enough time or we wouldn't be able to help them prepare, then we always offered them, as some sort of a role. So they could come and volunteer with us. They could be a part of the production team, even though they might not be a part of the performance team. And so we always allowed that, flexibility. But so we usually had 6 to 8 weeks to prepare. So during that preparation, every Saturday we would get together for having a 2 to 3 hour workshop, and it was like loosely structured, but things we would talk about was our anatomy. um, you know uh, One day if we talked about female and male anatomy, so like we understand the differences and things like that, and then we would move on into talking about ourselves in relation to our vulvas. And even though it's called the vagina monologues, we always refer to the female reproductive organs as the vulva, so making sure that we don't just limit it to certain things. So talking about reproduction, and also talking about sexual pleasure, consent, gender-based violence. And we also, like in the last one we did, we had a workshop that was dedicated to like toxic masculinity and having conversations around that. Actually, we had a really heated debate about like uh, toxic masculinity and whether there is toxic femininity or not.
Mm.
And so yeah, it was kind of left up in the air. But then it was a discussion we were having about like if certain traits are just masculine, like why are we saying that just the masculine traits are negative? Aren't there certain feminine traits that could also be described as negative? And so yeah, there was like discussions surrounding those things. And then we also had one where we talked about, of course, describing gender and sexuality and sex, what it means, right? In terms of the science and things like that. And we also had a few LGBT members who we asked them to, lead the discussions and things like that, and how to understand things. So we also talked about, like, when we're talking about consent, talking about there a lot of times we do end up having victims of sexual violence or survivors as a part of our team. So some people are comfortable sharing their experiences and some are not. So it was always open, like if somebody did not want to talk about it, it was okay. So, but we always, again, talking about Nepal's reproductive rights and things like that, as well as a part of our process. And we also, what we did was also, as we went through each piece, so even though there were separate people performing separate pieces, we as a whole would read through the entire Vagina Monologues catalog, and then, sort of assess, analyze it from a Nepali perspective, and then also critique it. Because the Vagina Monologues is very much a heteronormative and also more, white feminist centric. It didn't really involve in its whole, it evolved in its whole run. So so we always gave the liberty of, for our performers to, switch Nepali words if they wanted to make it more, to make it more relatable. We inserted like Nepali pop culture things, so that, to make it light as well. So like, for example, like one of the things I was doing was, like, when I'm talking about where I was peeing, then I described a highway in Nepal that and everybody would know about, and and then describing the toilet there, like, so things like that, as well as, like, certain things, certain things like, the kind of foods, or like even like, or whatever props were used. And of course, when I was doing the mourning, I used many more Nepali languages with which to mourn. And also, like, we're very Bollywood influenced, so we were very Bollywood influenced. So we talked a lot about, like, there was a moan that was just specifically directed at, like, Indian cinema, and things like that. So yeah. So and then, like, other ladies could, like, tweak their pieces a little bit as well. um and yeah.
Oh yeah,
So
Nariman.
so things like that. Yeah.
Yeah, Nariman.
Yeah.
Where are you, Nariman? Can you talk?
Hey,
Okay.
oh, hi.
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 She wants to ask you something, Madhu. Please go ahead, Nariman.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you can hear the Bollywood moan.
Okay, let me give it a try. I haven't practiced it in quite some time, so it's like over a year ago that, like, I mean, I was really practicing it. So okay, so the Bollywood one is nahi, nahi, ah, 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 ah. Okay. So it's basically a version of no, no, yes, yes.
Thank you.
Oh my God.
So
I love it. Now I'm gonna have a new
yeah, I think
reading of
yeah.
that word now. Bollywood.
Yeah, so I think, like, even as girls, like, we would get together in groups and practice our parts, like, meet, and we were mentoring each other. Like, so if somebody did a piece, like, we never repeated the same piece. So if I did the piece called The Flood, then the next year, whoever was doing The Flood, I would be her mentor, so that we could talk about it, and then provide more than guidance, like any questions and how you did it and things like that. So basically, yeah, for me, the lady who did it before me, she did it really well. So I was like, she got so much applause last year, I have to do this. I mean, I added some of my own, but then I was like, the Bollywood moan is always, like, or the new bride moan is always very popular. And so I added a few. In Nepal we have the Newar language and stuff like that. So I was like, we added that as well, and so that, like, helps to connect with different people, and yeah. So while doing these workshops, like even though there's like usually 35 to 40 girls as a part of the team, girls and women. So we had our youngest participant in 2020 was 18, and I was the oldest, so I was like 44 then. And so like that whole range of women coming together every Saturday. It might sound like it could be something that's challenging because it's so intergenerational, but somehow just coming together, and I think also not having any kind of hierarchy helped to like create I wouldn't say like everything was perfect, but it didn't really create as much conflict as I thought can sometimes occur, especially with very strong-headed, a lot of alpha females, alpha personalities around. So it wasn't as as challenging as I thought it might be. But one of the advantages is that women get to come together, and even if it's just 35 to 40 women, it's 35 to 40 lives that are changed. And almost everybody on our team, especially the younger girls who are like 18 to 24, they've gone on to form their own and start their own movements. So like two of the last girls, they started this entire movement where they were focusing on domestic violence during the COVID crisis. So they were doing flash mobs all over Kathmandu, and then and then people started doing it in other areas in Nepal after seeing it. So, a combination of activism through social media is also something that actually came out of it, because there's many young girls who are doing this. So I think even starting that movement and creating that space where girls learn to come into their own and find their own voice and their own power, and then be able to, lead off other young girls and be inspirational to other people, is I think that's one of the biggest advantages, because the ripple effect of that has been quite well seen. I'm going to see if I had organized a panel for the British Council sometime in March. I'm going to try and see if I can share a recording of that with you, Kalia, so you can share
Yeah.
it with the rest of the
Yeah.
with the rest
Thank
of the
you.
class, because it's actually an international panel on using social media for change during the pandemic. So we have speakers from Nepal, from India, from Bangladesh and Turkey. And it's facilitated by this really amazing Nepali woman called Pranika. So I will try and find that and send it over to you. I hope it still exists. The British Council should have it on their Facebook page, but I'll try and I'll try and find it, because it was
Yeah.
recorded, so it
Yeah.
shouldn't be a problem. But then if not, also I think I can still ask the British Council, because I know the people who did the recording for us. So I can still ask the British Council if they would be willing to share us the link if they have it in their drive or something like that, and I'll send it over to you,
Yeah,
because
that
I
would
think
be
it would be
great.
really nice. And I'm sure the British Council would also love it for their work to be more widely seen, because the Women of the World Festival is something that happens, it started off in London, but then it happens in, I think, about 28 different countries over the span of a year. And so there's people, like it happens in Turkey, it's happened in, Pakistan, it happens in Bangladesh, and like, and in Nepal, and like all across the world, like in Brazil, different
Oh, I think she froze.
to bring about women's empowerment and things like that. So that's a different thing. I'll try and share as many links I can with you, because it's like mostly focused on Nepal, but we have I think that we have like one politician, like two politicians from two different parties, also interviewing like the younger politician interviewing the older politician. So that was also very interesting about their challenges and things like that. And I think there's closed captioning, so or translation, so it should be. I'll try and get as many of those for you and share it with you.
Thank you.
Um,
I remember that
yeah. Uh,
can you hear me? When I
yeah,
I remember
I can.
when I had the opportunity to meet to see you actually that first time, and I saw the coordination that took place and the organization that took place around explicitly only talking about pleasure and women. I think it had been the first time in
Mm-hmm,
my life where I actually saw that happening,
mm-hmm,
and it felt strange. It was weird. It
mm-hmm,
was shocking to me. It was as if for some reason in my head I had never considered the possibility that we can be in
uh-huh,
space, in a learning space where we include, where we often forget to include our own bodies as living text,
mm-hmm.
not only for pain, but for pleasure. Because we,
Yes.
based on our race and ethnicity and race and religion sometimes and gender orientation, we are oppressed, and oftentimes a lot of the narratives are around issues of pain. And it's been like that, as you know, which is like an everyday for
Mm-hmm,
many women
mm-hmm,
and racialized men.
mm-hmm,
um,
mm-hmm,
but I just wanted to make the comment about how urgent it is to create a space where we can include the body as a living text to generate our own pedagogies of pleasure that can go along with pedagogies of liberation, because we need those self
mm-hmm.
moments
Yes.
to
And
help us.
we do, and a lot of times in these pleasure workshops or like little sessions that I do, I feel for talking about these things. So actually, I'm starting to work with another organization, and we're planning to actually have, instead of 3 2-hour three sessions of
Oh.
and just taboos, because in Nepal we have so many taboos surrounding women's sexuality especially. So we're thinking of expanding it to at least 6, so we can answer more specific questions regarding pleasure. And because like even something as simple as masturbation is not something that we talk about. Men can more easily talk about it amongst their groups or even with their partners, but it's not something that women easily talk about, especially women who are like my generation, like in their 40s and older. It's still a taboo. Like it's younger people who are in their late teens and early adulthood are more open to talking about those things. But then because the questions I get regarding uh, about pleasure and whether it's okay for them to ask their husbands or their partners for certain things is quite interesting. And it just comes from us being so repressed in many ways, where, as you're growing up, you're told not to touch, the lower parts of your body because it's considered impure. And of course, in Nepal, we have the stigma and the discrimination associated with being on your menstrual cycle or being on your period, and that being considered untouchable. So there is like we have this really unhealthy dichotomy where on one hand we our whole Hindu tradition is actually sort of, if you really truly understand it, based around reproduction and the the appreciation of the human union and reproduction through that. But then on the other hand, we shun and also discriminate against and actually vilify and make menstruation dirty. So it gives a really bad message to young women growing up, and which gets carried on for generations. Yes, Nariman, did you have a question?
I really, really appreciate you, Madhu, for saying this part. And I wanted to think with you and with the group out loud about this in particular, because I know,
Uh-huh.
yes, I know about what happens during women's menstruation and about, and how women are seen as intouchable in this part of their monthly cycle. But I also wanted to say to talk about how can we work with this from a decolonizing and a liberatory perspective, because also this is one of the things that is used a lot, I know, by international aid organizations to say, oh, look at those, global south countries who are, all the kinds of things are like backwards, or like their
Uh-huh.
traditions are not helpful, and we don't need to
Mhm.
go back to indigenous traditions because they have all these kinds of things. And I come from Egypt, so I also there's
Mhm.
also a lot of traditions that
Uh-huh.
are related to women, but I also never want to talk about
Mhm.
those traditions from a colonizing perspective, or like from an international aid perspective.
Uh-huh.
So then this becomes
Uh-huh.
like the
Uh-huh.
trap line of like, I my work in the world, I believe, is about actually reviving and reclaiming subjugated knowledge ecologies, but at the same time,
Mhm.
there are things that do not necessarily fit with how we understand the world today. And so, I'm wondering how you approach it
Yeah.
also.
So thank you so much for asking that question. Because just recently, I think about like 2 months ago, I was the technical expert for this group of uh, 12 to 16-year-olds who were doing a session on who were taking part of a comic book making session regarding menstrual health and hygiene. And so these young girls had so many questions for me, like regarding, like, my mother says this is dirty, is it dirty, right? So it's like, in Nepal, with certain age groups, it's really difficult, and sometimes it's very impolite or insensitive for us to go and tell somebody who's 80 years old you're wrong, you know and then but so there's multiple layers to this menstrual health problem, because like one is, in Nepal, like women in certain parts of Nepal, women are actually not allowed to live in the house during that time. So they make these, so each house or group of houses has this tiny hut. It's called a hut, except it's to for me to describe it for you, it's like the size of a dog kennel, like a little bit larger, like doghouse. And so women are expected to crouch there and stay there during their entire period. So since they're usually away from the house, they don't get warm meals. They get like the meals at the end when everybody has at, and then one of their home members, either their mother or their sister, bring them the food. So they usually get what's left over. So they don't really have proper nutrition. That's one thing, a lack of proper nutrition. And then they don't have a warm place to sleep, or even a comfortable place to sleep. And also, these huts, they have a window and a door, which is just a little bit larger window, but then they don't
Cabra, cadabra, patas de cabra, que vuelva amado.
I've used science to
Oh my God, why not? That was so interesting.
I
looks
know.
looks like I got
No, there
looks
you,
like
you're back, you're back.
yes. Yeah, I'm back. I think you guys lost me for a few seconds, but yeah. So basically, I tried to come from it because I mean, I have a debate where I don't think that we should be destroying those menstrual huts. What our government should be doing is saying if you're going to have a menstrual hut in your community, your menstrual hut should have these dimensions. You know, if a woman chooses, if a group of women want to go and stay in a separate place while they're bleeding, I think that should be their right. Or even if families want to send them, but it should be in such a place that they can cook for themselves, they can clean for themselves. You know, if it's in a safe, space where it's a gated, it's a gated house where they're not going to be like, they're not going to become victims of sexual violence and things like that. So I think like the way of addressing it should be, more than antagonistic towards what's actually already happening. If there's already a menstrual hut, the government should be able to tell people like, okay, if you're going to build menstrual huts in your community, your menstrual hut should be at least 10 feet by 10 feet. You know, you should have an attached toilet, there should be running water, there should be a place for the girls who are there to cook for themselves, they should have the rations that they can prepare meals for themselves and things like that. But in our communities, they're expected to do all the housework. you know they're not given the milk of the cow, but then they're expected to go and fetch the fodder for the cow. So I think if we made and I think in Nepal, probably the easiest way to be able to make a segue into changing tradition is to start with nutrition, and then make a segue into slowly changing other beliefs. And I believe this is like a generational thing. Like with every generation, we can see people like letting go of different like harmful practices. So in certain households, and then when we this tradition is called chaupari, but and it's practiced in far western Nepal. But for me, as a menstrual health practitioner, what I see is it's actually on a spectrum, because then there's somebody like me who often will not go to a Brahmin person's kitchen, or sometimes even their living room, if I'm menstruating, because I don't want to upset them if they find out that I'm menstruating, because I'm of a different caste, and we also have a very complex caste system in Nepal. So I might not do that. I will never go into any one of my friends' kitchens just in case their mom or their grandparents might be offended, without asking. So basically, somebody who practices menstrual taboos to that extent. Then there's the other extent where you're not allowed to live in your house, you are not given proper food and things like that. So usually a lot of times what I have to end up doing is talking about the science of what menstruation is, what happens in the body. And I also am always having discussions with school teachers about how menstrual blood is not dirty. And one time I had this science teacher challenge me and say that menstrual blood was deoxygenated, so that therefore it was dirty. And so I said, deoxygenated blood does not mean it's dirty. It just means it's carrying out carbon dioxide from the body. So that kind of stumped him. But I found out that, oh, okay, so I have that in my, arsenal of fighting with people. So, and oftentimes in schools, like, school teachers will say, like, we have a temple in our school. Are you going to come into our school to talk about menstruation when you're menstruating? And I've told them, yes, I will. And so they're like, why would you do that? And I said, I will not go to your temple, but I will come to the school, because it's your, according to Nepali, according to our constitution, your school children have the right to learn, and I'm here to, according to that constitutional article, I'm here to provide them with that education. So I shouldn't really be stopped. And then so things like that we do have to talk about it. And I'll say, yeah, I'm not going to come and contaminate your temple, but your school has like, you know, this many acres or like over an acre of property, like it's not going to matter. And and the a goddess of education, like, so in Nepal we have a goddess of education. So I said, like, I'm sure she also menstruated, so I don't think she would like you to discriminate against her. But also sometimes it can be a losing battle. Like, I mean, you know, I have been cornered by male teachers and also some female teachers who have been upset by what I said. So sometimes I have to be like, you know, first I always talk to the principal of the school, and then get a feeling of, you know, what are your students, what is your parent, you know, population like, what is your teachers population like, you know, what castes are you all. So different castes have a more severe or less severe beliefs about menstruation and things like that. So I kind of focus on that as well. But it's such an interesting question. And also, you know, in Nepal itself, it's really interesting. So, Hallie has said maybe we need a mobile menstruation hut. Yeah, maybe. But I also think we should just have a menstruation, like, you know, a large house where women can go and be there. And I think initially, like, of course, it's been like, you know, with the Hindu tradition, everything has been so warped with this, you know, how it's been, you know, like, as with all religious texts, you know, the interpretation makes a huge difference, and it makes a huge difference on who is interpreting it, you know, if it's a man or a woman. And then in Nepal, a lot of educated men, until, you know, until 70, 80 years ago, were Brahmin men. And Brahmins are also the high priests and things like that. So it's they who get to decide what is untouchable and what is, like, you know, acceptable and things like that. So we've had that, and we've had like so much systemic casteism, which is similar to like systemic racism as well in many ways, that it's still, there are certain things that are still prevailing till now. But with the newer generations, I see more of these changes happening. A lot of young girls don't even tell their parents when they start menstruating because they don't want to be stigmatized. So they have figured out, like, you know, from their friends, they figure out what kind of menstrual products they need to use, how to use them. And a lot of things they learn in school anyway. So, you know, a lot of them are like actually hiding the fact that they're not menstruating. And a lot of times parents are sometimes not, you know, in those areas where they have to hide it, parents are not always educated enough to, you know to even ask if their daughters are menstruating or not, because they don't really equate not menstruating to not being healthy. So yeah, it's quite interesting. By the time their parents actually find out, they're sometimes like 17, 18 years old, and it could be that they're finding out because their, you know, their daughter is being asked for marriage or something like that, you know. So it's quite interesting.
Sherry,
Okay, so
Sherry,
okay, let me
yeah,
try.
Sherry wrote a message, wrote a comment. Sherry, where is Sherry? There is Sherry. And maybe we can pick up on that thing, because I think it has a lot to do with some of the topics that we have been discussing in relationship to colonialism. Sherry?
Mhm.
Hi, Sherry.
Yeah, it was in response to the question, and also tying into it that yeah, I'm sort of quite familiar with how under colonialism, in the British Empire, anti-sodomy laws were put in place into law in many countries, like certainly across the global south. Like, you see it less in kind of Canada, New Zealand, etc. Though they did exist until a certain, I mean, I'm not sure exactly when, but yeah, and slowly in places people have been kind of abolishing them and whatnot. But then you also have like the just implicit things that happened under colonialism of you know, just attitudes amongst genders and even sexual diversity. The comment was made also too around menstruation in particular indigenous cultures, also around like two-spirit people, that was looked at as being some kind of aberration under British colonialism and probably other European countries. So yeah, I think there's a lot of these, and of course you mentioned too, like being tied to religion, that religion's used in a particular way, a way of kind of policing and moralizing, for sure, women's bodies and just sex and sexuality in general. Yeah, so I'm so intimately tied, and I think obviously you're talking about it, but I just thought that law that has always kind of stuck with me, that not to kind of say that all homophobia comes from this particular place, but I think you can't talk about homophobia globally without talking about colonialism, for example.
Yeah, I mean, I think in certain parts of India, homophobia is quite like overt and things like that. But in Nepal, since we were never really colonized, and whatever, like, I mean, I feel now that we're colonized by India, but at least culturally and in many ways financially and things like that. But in Nepal, we actually are quite progressive in that way, if we can call it that, as in, like, our census now allows somebody to describe themselves as, which is still not correct, but third sex, which is, but it doesn't, that talks more about intersex, but then it doesn't really address people who are trans, so we do have that, but then there is a movement, quite a small but a strong movement towards changing those things, and our LGBT community is quite active, and there is a lot of, also international interest in changing those things. But homosexuality initially was, I think there are some people who still don't understand it, but or understand the science behind it. But even though in Nepal, like especially in the northern part of Nepal, it's less stigmatized than it is in certain parts of the southern part of Nepal. So the southern part of Nepal is very much influenced by what happens in India. So there are pockets where there can be violence, and this is not only against the LGBT community, but also against anybody who does something that they consider non-traditional. So so in that way, it has sort of trickled into Nepal as well. But then if you look at the Hindu religion, we actually have both a male and female of most of our major gods. So they have a male, and sometimes they exist as both male and female. And there are stories about where two gods consummated their love and things like that. So it's actually considered quite common, though, like, I mean, what religious texts or stories tell you and what people practice is quite different. But sometimes in Nepal, what happens is that even though people are not people will be passive about how they are or their aggressions. So if there's an LGBT rally going on, or during Pride Week, there will not be counter protesters usually. But, like, the counteraction to that could be individuals' reactions to these people, but it's not something that they will come out in the open and show, like in other places. Like, that sense of righteousness is not something that's very overtly practiced in Nepal. And I often have my male friends asking me about these, what does this mean? Like, like one time, it was about like 10 years ago, for our last census. So the last census in Nepal happened in 2011. So at the end of 2010, they were doing the census about, like, talking about the third gender and third sex and things like that. So I remember I was repertorying that session. And I had just finished my master's from the States, and I'd been working in the sexual health thing, the sexual health promotion part in our college campus. So I had a lot of information, and my mom is a gender specialist. So they thought she should be able to answer those questions about sexuality and sex and gender. And then, so there were certain things that my mom also didn't know. So I was like, and then somebody else also didn't know, older gender, women my mom's age and older. So I was like, oh, I know the science behind this. I can explain it. So like I had these statisticians, like, who were in their 40s at that time, coming and asking me, like, they didn't ask it during class, like, I mean, during the workshop, but then at the dinner, one man asked me, like, so ma'am, like, how can a woman be a wife and then be a lesbian? And I was like, well, she can change who she chooses to love, like, and then so he said, okay, then I have a question. It was very interesting. I mean, I actually laughed at him before I answered it, but so he said, so ma'am, if a chooses to make, she's not changing her biology, so I mean, so a lack of that understanding. And it's also
Madu,
because yes,
you
yes,
froze when the information was getting good. Okay, so there was
okay,
a
so shall I
husband.
repeat it? Okay,
Yes, yes.
yes, so okay, so so the question I was asked is like, so if a husband and wife get divorced and then the wife decides to become a lesbian, can she still have babies? Like, can she still give birth to children? So I had to explain to him that she's choosing, like, she's changed who she chooses to love, but she's not changed her biology. So she can always have children. And then, so like I said, then she can choose to have children by artificial insemination, or she can still choose to have a child by having sex with a man, but she can still describe herself as lesbian, and yeah, so it often gets a little bit complicated because a lot of times people want black and white answers, so it's easier for them to compartmentalize their understanding of things, and that's often a challenge um, here, because especially in Nepal, even though as a society we're such like we exist on such a spectrum a lot of the time, moving back and forth according to our conveniences, and then whatever ethics and morals are required at that time. But then a lot of times we just want to box people in, um, which makes it easier for us to not really think about things or to analyze things and be analytical. So we're not really critical thinkers. And I find that quite challenging sometimes in my master's level classes, because a lot of my students come straight from their bachelor's and they've just like not really been learning about critical thinking or like critically processing things. So a lot of times I'm expected to spoon feed them, when I would rather that they think for themselves, when like I'm just there to like facilitate their knowledge growth and things like that. So yeah, it can be interesting, but this is what I found in my past, like I think I've been teaching for about 7 or 8 years. So those are some of the things that I learned as well. But also my academic teaching is quite, experiences with academic teaching is quite different from when I actually go and conduct workshops and things like that. So it's, I think those, just the way that the system is set up, it fosters different types of learning, or some restrict a particular type of learning. Like with my students for my master's, even if I want to go a little bit out of the syllabus, a lot of my students are often not interested because it's not on their syllabus. So why should they be wasting time? If it's not going to be a part of their examination, they don't want to learn, or they don't want to know. So with some of my so two of the colleges I teach at, I have that problem. But another one of the colleges I teach at, they allow the instructor to actually design the course. So I'm actually having so much fun with it, and then discussing it with students about what they would like to learn. What would they like to focus on more, and things like that. So yeah, there's a change happening. So yes. No, I'm like, I'm losing you.
What about now? What about now?
You're like very small. I don't know if it's
What about now?
like your voice is very, um,
What about now?
very small.
What about now? No?
Okay, it's getting better,
Getting better? Okay.
but it's still like your voice, your sound level is very low.
Okay, yeah, it's I think there is a spirit that comes to visit me to these Zoom classes once in a while. They usually say that sometimes
Uh-huh.
in Zoom you have trolls, trollings, troll.
Uh-huh.
I
Uh-huh.
can't pronounce the word, but I think it's the spirits that come in like, ooh. Um, I know that there is probably many questions or the people we can. Samia, you can still cannot hear me?
No, no te podemos escuchar bien. Se escucha muy bajito, like casi nada.
I lost my voice last night with the other group. Madhu.
Use the
Okay.
microphone.
I know. Okay. Sure, blame it on. Okay. Anyone please ask
Ya
questions?
mejoró.
Yeah?
Yeah, we're good.
I literally didn't do anything. Okay.
Yeah, now it's back perfect.
Okay.
Maybe you do have a spirit who wanted
I
to
know
share
I
your
do.
space.
Oh, I know I do. There is, I'm gonna kick him out today. And I know it's no, I think it's a he, but yes, don't shout. Okay, so wait. So now wait a minute. I think now it's going to work. Someone doesn't want you to be talking about sex. The powers that be. The powers that be. See, that's millennial talk because I didn't get it. Okay, so does anybody have any questions for Madhu, Dr. Badra? The colonial powers are now when you talk about these things. These things, what are these things? Well, no, let's talk, no, seriously. And I mean, the reason why I thought about Madhu immediately when I was trying to imagine this experience was to have her join us when we talk about the body and the body as a primary text. So in Nepal, as I said, so one of the first things that I did not anticipate going to Nepal was that in Nepal, I realized the importance of including the body as a primary teaching text, like using your body as a living pedagogy. Every lesson that you can think about comes from the body, like 95% of it. And in Nepal, also, I learned about the stratification of ethnicity. And Madhu talked a little bit about this, about people that cannot be touched and that they cannot touch you because of the way that the caste system is. So the Brahma, as Madhu explained, are in the head, and that's where lawyers, doctors, priests, some politicians, they come from the highest. And then the people that are in the caste system that are found on the feed are those that usually end up doing undesirable jobs, and jobs or employment that are often referred to as being dirty. So like when someone dies, they have to be cremated, and the people working with that body, or people that are sweeping the streets, for example, and cleaning, or domestic workers, are the untouchables, the ones that are in the lowest caste. So this has a lot to do with our body, because if I, for example, I'm in fraternity or in sorority or in solidarity with someone that is in despair, my first reaction, even though I am not a hugger at all, like I am, like if you ever come to my place to have barbecue, I'm just gonna be like, what's up? I'm not a hugging person. I'm not a sweet person. I'm like the most boring, dry person ever. But in a moment of urgency, I would want to hug whoever is in despair. And that is, in Nepal, I learned that that is something that people physically cannot do. So how do we read the skin? How do we read the act of touching in that particular context? And when we think about it that way, our entire pedagogy that we have, for example, design, needs to be automatically adjusted and edited and modified to be able to include that not everyone that is going to be listening to you or learning from you read the act of touching the same way. I met, for example, a Nepali woman in New York once who was from one of the lowest caste, and she couldn't do it. Like she couldn't do it. And then the notion of consent then becomes much bigger than biology. It becomes symbolic, because she was no longer in Nepal. She was already in New York, and she had been there for more than 15 years. But there was symbolically, the act of not touching was still very present in her life. And when I sat down with her to talk about how that actually had been manifested into her going to school, for example, in New York, it was horrendous. It was horrible, because she had to take gym classes because of everything. Because when you have a homogeneous curriculum, that's what it does. It automatically reads everyone as the same, as having the same experience. So when I thought about the body, Madhu, you were like the first person that I thought about. Mm-hmm. Especially what you do with the work that you do. And mm-hmm. We have some hands up, Hallie and Gloria.
Yeah, when you were talking about in Nepal and the women during menstruation, I started thinking about in the West, it's almost to the extreme and the opposite, where we pretend women don't menstruate and they're expected to constantly keep up the same pace no matter what. And you know, how it's considered really radical. Like when I had my business, I would say, because I only had women that worked for me, and I would just say, if you've got your period and you need to stay home, period days, you know, that's it. But so it just was really, I was just thinking, man, they find all sorts of ways to police our bodies, right? You know, just to make it as hard as possible for us to just be in our own skin and in our own biology, you know, whatever that may be. And it doesn't matter where, you know. I think the West is so, because you can go buy products at the store or you have ads for it. In its own way, it just wants to pretend like we don't have a body either. So that was very like to me, a bit of a light bulb moment. But I was also okay, yeah, go on. No, go.
No, what I was just gonna say is like I think like what you said, Hallie, is like so interesting, and it's also like, you know, no matter what, for women, either by ignoring the fact or like, you know, acting like a menstruation does not happen, or like overemphasizing the fact that menstruation happens, it often has a similar effect on women's lives. You know, where the importance of or the significance of it is, whether you overstretch it or you ignore it, it has a negative impact on our lives in different ways. But the negative impact is there, like how you said, like, you know, in Western cultures, like, you know, you're expected to just you know, carry on with your life. There's enough menstrual products to help you take care of your menstrual health and hygiene, and if you have pain, pop a pill or whatever, but then, you know, continue to function. And then the opposite of that in Nepal is like women are still expected to function, but, you know, not given the proper menstrual health management tools for them to be able to be healthy at the same time, you know. So I mean, even being like at two separate spaces, but it still gives us the disadvantage of not being able to be healthy of body and of mind, you know.
Yeah, it's like denying the biology of our body. And then I think that works right into what Chari brought up, which is the denying the biology of the body when it comes to homosexuality, when it comes to being trans. You know, it's just this constant denying of what is intrinsic to our bodies. And but I just, you know, and I just wondered, you know, this is more of like a general question. So how do these things affect when we're in the classroom? Like, how does this, you know, all these issues that women carry around their bodies, and LGBTQ people have around their bodies, you know, how do we work within this hot mess right now that it is within the classroom, and honor everything that we need to honor?
I think a lot of things just right now, frankly speaking, fall through the cracks. And you know, a lot of LGBT youth, especially in schools, often feel, you know, stigmatized, discriminated against, not heard. There are certain teachers who are actually interested to know more, and because of you know, smartphones and internet, people are self-learning a lot, which is great. And that is always there. But in terms of menstruation, even though it's been changing over the last decades, like earlier, a lot of girls, even though initial school enrollment in Nepal, girls have higher school enrollment than boys, and then they have lower dropout rates in primary school until they start menstruating, and then the dropout rates of girls like really exponentially increase than those of boys. And that's because the schools don't have proper infrastructure for menstruating girls. Like, you know, they don't have running water for girls. They don't have proper latrines. Sometimes they don't even have sex routines. So, you know, they will have to use it in like, you know, they'll have to use the same places. There's no way for girls to dispose of their menstrual pads and things like that. So that is slowly changing. And like in 2015, Nepal had a huge earthquake. So I was involved in a school, like, you know, in a school sanitation program. And we built a lot of, like, you know, girl friendly latrines. But that was, a lot of it was often in terms of paper, because the implementing partners who were responsible for doing that, either the girls' toilets were more inaccessible than the boys' toilets, or the girls' toilets were a little bit further or a little bit down the slope on the side of, you know, so that was meant to be for their privacy, but it also meant sometimes physically it was inaccessible. So like, for example, one of the schools, like we went to visit, like, so the construction had happened in April, May, And in May, June, like the monsoon started in Nepal. And when we went to do an evaluation in August, we found that the girls' latrines were actually inaccessible because it had been made in such a way. And then there was such a huge, like, backlog of water that wasn't drained properly, that the girls couldn't really step into the toilet without wetting their shoes and things like that. So, I mean, so obviously that would deter use and things like that. And schools don't have the finances to make sanitary pads available for students. So often, if they're bleeding, students will not go to school, or if they start bleeding, they will go back home. And also, a lot of times, families are not rich enough to be able to buy, disposable sanitary pads, and using, like, homemade cloth, which it's perfectly fine. But then, when you don't have the physical environment for you to be able to change your, cloth, menstrual cloth and things like that, then it becomes a deterrent. So that is one of the things. And then, of course, with the LGBT community in schools, it's initially there used to be a stigma of the stigma of somebody being more effeminate. Though, like with girls, it's okay for a girl to be a tomboy, because, like, in Nepal, a lot of times, like, if she's if a woman is lesbian, and usually two girls' friendships is not frowned upon, and neither was two males' friendship, unless they find out that they're being sexually active. Like, so it's like, had you been in Nepal, like maybe 15, 20 years ago, it would be perfectly normal for you to see two men holding hands in the middle of the road, like, and they're not homosexual. Just that, boys and girls, like heterosexual, um, proximity of young people, if they're not married, was not encouraged. So now it's really interesting, like sometimes in, like, especially in the urban setting of Kathmandu, with you know with educated parents, about uh 10, 12 years ago, people would joke about saying, like, oh, I'm just happy my kid, like, likes a girl or likes a guy, I don't have to worry about them being homosexual. But now there's a change in parents themselves are saying, well, my child can choose to be with whoever they they love or they want. Their sexuality is something I'm going to accept. And what I see is really interesting is also, like, in the so I've been with the vagina monologues like about 5 years. And with the younger generation, I found out, especially 18 to 21-year-olds, they were experimenting with their sexuality a lot more. And they would come and, like, in our introduction, we would say, like, when we introduce ourselves, we usually say who we are, what we professionally or as a student. And then we also, if you're okay with sharing your sexuality and your gender, we ask them to share their sexuality and their gender. And a lot of younger girls would often come up and say that they were bi-curious or outright bisexual. So there's a lot more experimenting that's happening. And I think it's sort of a trend that seems to be popularized among youth. So and also, like, when I go to schools to talk about or even conduct research on sexual reproductive health practices, like knowledge and things like that, a lot of times when I do focus group discussions with boys, they answer, like, when I ask them, do they know about sex, do they know how it happens, and they say yes. And a lot of times when I ask them, like, how do you know that, they say from porn. And also their questions are also about, like, young boys are more interested to know when it's okay to start becoming sexually active. So kids are, like, not only thinking about it, but they're talking about it. And somebody who goes in as, like, an external speaker, they're open to talking about it more often. And I thought initially that when I would be answering questions about sex from 8th graders to 12th graders, like, they would put their questions in a box so it's anonymous. So by the end of it, the the male students and the female students both, I would have separate sessions with them. They were so comfortable. In the end, they would like just write the questions and put it in my hand, so everybody knew who was asking that question. So so there's a lot, like, you know, people are youngsters, which is a good thing. They're much less conscious about what people might think. So yeah. And I think Shireen and Gloria still have questions. So Gloria, would you like to go first?
Hello. Like, first of all, a little bit of context. I'm in a recliner right now because I was vaccinated today. I wasn't planning to be vaccinated, but now I'm noticing in my body, I'm a dancer. So I notice the differences between the mobility that I usually have and the mobility that I'm having right now. Like, I can move this arm, but this one not so much. But I also, when I'm talking about it here at home, I notice that my mom doesn't believe my symptoms. And that is because she has a disconnect from her own body, to the point where, like, when she experienced this, like, she wouldn't notice anyway. Because like, this bodily conscience from movement, from dancing, from pleasure in moving, my mom doesn't have it. So it's difficult to communicate, like, I'm not in pain, I'm not like in any discomfort, but there is a side effect, there is a symptom that I am perceiving because I know what my body normally feels like. So the first question, how do we develop this body consciousness in other people? Like, what are like the dance practices in the girls that you work with that would help them develop this bodily conscience? And then how do we move like the discourse in health from the exclusively reproductive and like centering in the vagina to taking up like the whole vulva and the whole body? Because pleasure doesn't come from the vagina. Like, vaginal orgasms are very rare, and you need to stimulate like the clitoris, the whole skin, the mind. So how do we move the discourse? Like, the vagina monologue were groundbreaking when they first came out, but now we need to be ready to like to talk about a lot more things that are going on in the body. So how do we move that narrative there? And also, I want to ask.
So
I
thank
want
you.
to ask.
Yeah.
I want to ask you like the last
Yeah,
thing
go ahead.
about
Go
like
ahead. Yeah.
your relationship with Eve Antler and your opinion on her, and because I didn't like what she did with the women in Congo, like taking this pain from Black women and profiting from their own bodily experiences and presenting that as her own. So I want to know your opinion on that. And those are my like 3 questions.
Okay. Okay. Okay, I'm going to try kindly answer. Thank you so much, Gloria, for bringing this up, because it gives me an opportunity also to go into a little bit more detail, like how I approach, you know, talking about pleasure to women, because a lot of times, like, you know, when I start talking about pleasure, I don't just jump into sexual pleasure. So I actually have this exercise with women. And sometimes when I do it with men as well, where I ask them to, you know, think of their 5 senses, like sight, you know, hearing, taste, touch, and things like that. And then I ask them to make a list of what gives them pleasure, to, like, you know, what gives your eyes pleasure, what gives your nose pleasure, what gives your mouth pleasure, what gives your ears pleasure, what gives your skin and your hands pleasure, and things like that. And then so that way they associate, a lot of times people then associate that with, like, you know, sometimes when people talk about what gives their skin pleasure, they talk about a soft breeze, or they talk about like rain on their skin. And when they're talking about their mouth, like some of them end up saying kissing, but usually they start off by flavors, like food and things like that. And then with their nose, they talk about perfumes or like the smell of a rose. And then with their eyes, things like that. So then I slowly make a segue into connecting that to, would you find it, what of these do you find romantic? And then like moving on into, then I say, then okay, of this, then this is where romance comes in for you with your five senses. And then what do you find sexually arousing? So it kind of makes a slow segue where we do it in various pieces, but also with respect to our vulvas. I actually, before, it's something they can do or not do, it's up to them. But I always give them an exercise of where I would like them to, actually look at their vulvas, and actually if they can draw it and keep it with them. They don't have to share it with everybody else. If somebody chooses to share it, they can share it. But otherwise, I allow them the freedom of not sharing it. But I also ask them, if you want to talk about it, how did you feel if you do it? And then and if you didn't want to draw it, if you don't mind sharing your reason for not looking at it or not drawing, giving them the option, and also having discussions about that. And it's really interesting that you asked me about dance. It's something I've never done before, but I'm going to start exploring on that as well, because a lot of us in Nepal, we follow a lot of Bollywood dance moves. So like, we do want to be hypersexualized, but then our hypersexualization of ourselves is also like not related to it's sort of like we're there as performance pieces where we are a part of knowingly or unknowingly objectifying ourselves, but then it's not really with a human connection. Because if you've watched like, Bollywood movies and things like that, you always have an item girl or an item number. And earlier in the 70s, it used to be there was the heroine and she was all good, but then now the heroine is also allowed to be the item girl. So there's always so there's that interesting thing in which the heroine it's okay for the heroine to be sexualized. Earlier, she was very much like, as a as a sign of purity and stuff like that. And I hope that answers your question, Gloria. And also now moving on to my opinion about Eve Ensler. Well, so, when I was first introduced to the vagina monologues, I thought she was pretty amazing. And then, she has very strong performance pieces. Like even in TED Talk, there's one where she talks about the girl, the girl power and things like that. And that's like a very moving piece. And we often show it in our vagina monologues because, of course, the vagina monologue, she has the creative content for that, right? But personally, like when I started following her regarding her thing, I do feel that she took, like, actually, even if you look at the vagina monologues, the 200 women that she interviewed, it's actually, those are her stories, right? And I believe that such type of knowledge should be available to everybody. It shouldn't be, I mean, I don't think there should be a trademark on that, or like, or what do you call it? Like, I don't think the vagina monologues is something that can be plagiarized or like, stolen. And actually what I'm doing is something a little bit, like I'm actually going against the vagina monologues like rules and regulations by performing my piece today, because we're actually not allowed to perform it. A couple of months ago, on the International Day of the Girl Child, the UNICEF had also asked us to do something similar. And I wrote to them asking them for permission if I could perform their Coochie Snorter, piece, if our team could perform that for the International Day of the Girl Child. And they said no. And I was like, oh, but because I'd written to them saying it's for UNICEF, it's for the International Day of the Girl Child. And they were like, no, you can't use it. And I just felt that came from so much privilege on their part that they could actually say that. And also, I mean, I know Eve Ensler has made this huge name for herself. She no longer calls herself Eve. She goes by V, you know. And I think in her own right, yes, she is groundbreaking. But also, it would be nice if she brought along women as she rose, if she allowed women to rise up with her at the same pace instead of, you know, her always being um, a little bit ahead, or how to say that, because I think if we're going to bring about like cultural and social change this way, you know, us as women's right activists, unless we all rise together, there can't be any hierarchy, be it in terms of producing knowledge. Like, you know, if you're going to produce knowledge, I think it should be for everybody. And also when if you're going to be like, you know, and the other thing I also critique about like, you know, after having performed the vagina monologues for like 4 years continuously, you do tend to, like, the first year I was just excited to be a part of it and I didn't really critique it, but the more I started critiquing it and becoming involved in the becoming involved in the process of producing it, you know, I think the team in Nepal, we go way up above and beyond in making sure that, you know, the vagina monologues are very well integrated and we're able to, you know, assimilate it into our own Nepali system. But I also felt that, you know, I mean, Eve Ensler knew that there was such a global movement. Why didn't she ever ask for contributions from countries, you know, to add to the monologues? And now that, you know, everything is so caught up in the Black Lives Matter, not to undermine the Black Lives Matter movement, it is very important and it should happen, but just to focus on that, you don't have to give up on something that already exists, right? So the vagina monologues, like, I think like for us in Nepal, like, everybody has been so excited, and I had to tell our team that we can't perform it because we're not allowed to do it over any social media. Like, I mean, we can't do it over Zoom. And then they just took it off the table. So like V-Day is no longer going to be performing the vagina monologues, I think, ever. They stopped it because their focus is now going to be on something else. So I think that's kind of sad as well, because like it's been about 20 years. And yes, for maybe you know, what Eve Ensler envisioned, maybe she thinks this 20 years has been enough for the movement she wanted to start and whatever endpoint she had. But for those of us who caught on later, our process was still happening. It would be nice to be able to use that material. But, you know, the positive of that is like actually me and a team of my vagina monologue girlfriends, like we're actually looking for funding and also planning on doing our own, collecting our own stories. So that's a good thing. So I guess we'll have something that's more specific to Nepal, and we'll have a performance. And my idea is to actually prepare this document, you know, with a combination of, you know, maybe because we have like so many different ethnicities and so many different issues that women face, from like, you know, being a new daughter-in-law to being a mother-in-law to like, you know, to being expected to be a working mother as well as a daughter-in-law, you know. So there's so many stories we will have. So I'm hoping that once we make these stories available, then I would also develop a manual that is like a sort of like a guideline for conducting workshops, and you know, give it to the government. Our government has a women and child division, so I'm thinking of handing it over there, so it'll be in Nepali, and then anybody can use it for fundraising or for creating awareness and having dialogue. So we're thinking of doing that. It might take a year or two, but like that's something that's in the pipeline. I've been writing a lot of proposals and submitting it to like UNICEF and different organizations, because it's like, you know, we're trying to cover a broader spectrum of Nepali women's stories, and it's like taking and so different, we'll have to find different donor agencies that will fund different stories or story collections and actually workshops as well. So yeah, um that's my answer, Gloria. I don't know if any of y'all agree with me or perhaps feel even more strongly than I do. And if it's okay with you, Gloria, I'm going to move on to Shireen.
Hi, good evening, Dr. Bhadrayo. Thank you for sharing your experiences, your knowledge, your performance at the beginning. And my question, I guess, sort of tags on to Hallie's, because I'm always thinking of within the education sphere. And I know you talked a lot about it already, so you know, feel free to sort of cut corners in your answer. But the sex ed, you know, curriculum in the province of Ontario has always sort of been a hot topic. And the current government sort of bounced our curriculum back 20 years because they didn't agree with what was being taught sort of, you know, progressively by the previous liberal government, right? And so certain things were completely cut out, like, you know, maybe different genders and how they you know may identify, or talking about you know different sexuality. It was totally cut from the curriculum, and so basically really erase student experiences and families. And so it was sort of, you know, brought back because there was quite a protest. But I guess my question is about, you know, who's, and not so much responsibility, because the responsibility lies on all of us as a community, right? But this idea of teaching our students about sexuality, gender, and a sex ed curriculum has really been bounced around by, you know, is it the responsibility of the family? Is it the responsibility of teachers? And no one really seems to want to take up that responsibility of educating, you know, our youth. And it's such a taboo, you know, topic, and teachers, there's very few teachers, at least in my experience, that really want to teach it. It's kind of, they're asked to maybe teach it by admin, and take a very, I think as Gloria mentioned, a very biological approach, right? This is what the female body does, and this is what the, you know, the typical male body does. But we're not talking about all the things, as you said, that students are finding out on their own in social media. And so there's this huge, like, you know, gap of learning and really meeting our students' needs. You know, we talked in a previous session as well about sort of the hypersexuality, hypervisibility of certain bodies over others, right, in the classroom, and how dress code, you know, plays into that. We talked tonight too a little bit about the accessibility of you know, menstrual items, and this does not seem to be something that's discussed or made available in even like Western schools here, right? It's still difficult for students to access that, and then maybe they're only, you know, in the female designated washrooms, right? And so that plays back to like this colonial approach in our education system. And the last sort of thing I'll talk about, ask you too, is about, you know, the role of teachers. I feel, again, in my experience, female teachers are often maybe overlooked for certain positions of leadership or promotion, especially in departments such as the French department, language departments, because they take maternity leave or they leave, right? And so they're negatively affected by wanting to raise their family forever, how long that they want to. And I've had a principal, you know, really bring that up, matter of factly say, we are not putting a teacher in this position because she's young and may want to start a family, right? So just, anyways, those are lots of ideas, but just anything that you feel that you maybe didn't add in terms of Hallie's questions about how we can approach a sex ed curriculum in a decolonized, liberatory way, because even in a you know, maybe socially progressive society, we really aren't. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think like in terms of Nepal, like so it's really interesting because in terms of Nepal, like we have the health department, we have a Ministry of Health and we have a Ministry of Education, and both of them have made an attempt to talk about like sexual reproductive health in a slightly better way, but then the unfortunate part is that when they're even trying to talk about it, there's nothing about, like, you know, there's not enough discussions about sexuality and why it affects our sexual health choices, right? Like, you know, like, I mean, because it's great for a 16, 7, a 12, 13, 14-year-old to know about what are the different type of contraceptive methods available. But also they should be learning, they learn about their hormones, but they should also be learning how to cope with the hormonal changes that happen, the sexual curiosity that happens in their body, you know, not stigmatizing it, finding somebody that they can talk to. And one of the biggest challenges here in Nepal is the fact that, you know, it's a generational thing again. Like about it was almost like 10 years ago, I started doing some research on like you know, sexual reproductive health curriculum in schools, and the school teachers, they had the urge to learn, to teach, but then when they were in school, nobody taught them, because like in Nepal, like one of the things is like, you know, we have such poor like monitoring and surveillancing of teachers and whether they teach or not, that the section on reproductive.
Can you guys hear her? No? Madhu, we cannot hear you. Sorry. No. We can't hear you. No. You can, also you can hear us, but we cannot hear you. That's strange. Oh, so now welcome to my world. My spirit went to yours. He decided to take a plane, but it arrived much faster than what I anticipated. I thought they were not making those planes anymore, but the Superjet is back. No, nada. Can you hear me now? No. Start singing a song, Madhu. I am going to log off and log back on. Okay, you do that. I'm gonna play us. Oh no, I already played this song. Never mind. Okay, so she logged off. She's logging in again. Okay, I'm gonna. Where did she go? Oh, she literally logged off. Okay. I thought she was just gonna unplug like me. It's my fault for provoking the wrath of sexually repressing power. Gloria! There is Madhu again. Okay, Madhu? Can we hear your beautiful voice? No. No. No.
Try just turning off the video camera. Sometimes that works.
No. Try. Sugar.
Try replugging your headphones in, maybe.
Does this work now?
Yes.
I unplugged my head.
Yes.
Okay, great. So, as I don't know where you guys lost me, but I was talking about school teachers actually sharing with me that even though they want to teach, they never had education themselves, so it's really difficult for them to like go back and teach, right? And so I had this interesting experience like about 4 years ago where I was a part of the team that was making this training manual for school teachers regarding menstrual hygiene management, but then it was funded by the German International Agency, so they wanted us to expand on talking about sexual reproductive health as well. So I said, okay, if we're going to put in sexual reproductive health, this is a great opportunity for us to put in, you know, a chapter on talking about sex, gender, and human sexuality, right? And then they said there was like 3 different organizations supposed to be working on this. And initially they said no. Right? So I came back a couple of days later and I said, we should really have this, because at this day and age, it's not sufficient for us to be talking about different family planning methods without talking about the different type of sexes that can happen among school children. right? And then they were like, oh, for example, I said, like, for example, if it's gay boys, then they should know that they can use condoms, right? And, you know, and then they were like, oh, so and then they asked me to, and then there was discussions about somebody who had to lead the entire team and put the whole manual together, because different organizations were writing different sections. So there was nobody really volunteering to do that larger task of putting it all together. So I said, I'll do it, but then I'm gonna add, like, you know, 3 more chapters that we have not all agreed on here. And one of them was talking about sex, gender, and sexuality. And then the other 2 chapters was actually conducting, like, you know, teaching the teachers to actually conduct, like, barrier analysis and solution analysis. So, like, you know, so that they would know what the barriers there are for their students to learn, and then what are some of the ways that students can find their own solutions to, like, learning about these barriers, like, you know, to combating these or mitigating those barriers. So they finally did allow me to do it. And I was a part of, like, so one training was done in Eastern Nepal, and one training for that was done in far Western Nepal. And unfortunately, the team that did it in far Western Nepal decided, like, not to really focus on the chapter on sex, gender, and sexuality. They focused more on the ones that they wrote about, though it was part of the larger, like, curriculum and stuff like that. They just told the teachers, like, you can learn it on your own. But then for me, because I was conducting those sessions, and I made sure that, you know, and the thing about knowledge being available to everyone, like, I was conducting a training with, like, 3 other women, and none of them wanted to share their PowerPoint slides with the school teachers. And I was the only one who was, like, sharing it, because we hadn't gotten around to printing the books for them, right? Because we hadn't finalized it as a team. So we conducted the training, but then I was like, we have to give it to them, like, otherwise what will they have to look at, you know? And so I gave everybody, like, or whoever gave me their email address, I emailed it to, like, like the 70 something teachers who were participating. I emailed it to, I think I emailed it to at least 55 who had email addresses and things like that. But, you know, a couple of male teachers actually, and this is, again, there's a distinction between men and women feeling comfortable to actually talk about it. The male teachers came back and, like, asked me more questions, or said, like, can I have your personal email? Is it okay if I call you or email you if I have any questions about the material you gave us? Whereas only a few women teachers asked for it, because then it just shows the comfort level. Also, the males felt comfortable enough to come and ask me for this information, whereas some women did not. And when the women overheard the male teachers asking me that, then they chimed in and said, can we also contact you? But it also shows, like, even in, like, as progress or, you know, change is happening, that men are also catching up more. And we recently had something very interesting in Nepal, which about maybe 6 months ago, there was a men-led, men feminists, we had a men, like, you know, male allyship. There was, like, a conference actually organized by this male group that call themselves feminist. And one main organizers is actually my student at gender studies. And he didn't invite any of the department. He just invited the department chair to give the keynote speech or something like that, and then didn't invite anybody else, or even his other colleagues, like 1 year ahead and 1 year junior to him in a master's program. So that was, like, really interesting. And of course, he got a lot of flack from it, from most of the feminists. But then there were some were saying, like, at least he made an effort. But I think it was a huge learning for him, and I don't think he's gonna do anything like that next year. It was just really, really interesting. I mean, I think it came from a good place, but then again, why do men have to come in and like try and take space we're trying to create for ourselves? It's so frustrating. Yeah, so it's really interesting. So I hope that answered your question, Shireen.
And can you hear me? Yes, okay. I know I'm very cognizant of the time because it's 7:30 p.m. here in Eastern time. I do not even want to ask you what time is it there now, Madhu.
Oh, it's 11 past 5 a.m. So it's nice and like, I mean, well, it's a overclouded skies, but then the sun should have been out.
Namaste and Dhanyabad.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you so much for your participation and your really excellent questions. And also, like, I have a lot of food for thought myself on, like, you know, how I can do stuff here as well as I go forward. So
yeah,
thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Madhu.
So energizing. Yeah.
I'll see you in the trenches, and I'll forward
yes.
Everyone, whoever wants to obtain the information that you wanna share.
Yes, I'll try and find that by the end of this week and share it with you so you can share it with everyone.
Yes, and I wanted to ask you before you leave. Have you read the book called Pleasure Activism? It's a new book by Marianne Brown.
Oh, I'm gonna have it. Okay, I'm gonna have my bookstore order it because like in Nepal we don't have Barnes and Noble or like fancy
that's
bookstores,
why
right?
I know.
So if I want a book,
that's why I wanted to ask you.
I'm gonna have to give the name to my yeah. So yeah, you said Pleasure
Activism. I'll put
Activism,
it on,
right?
I'm gonna put it in Instagram and tag you, and
okay, great.
Let me know if you can get it.
I'll order it.
You hook up, okay.
I know I can. There's the guy who I buy books from. He can get it from Amazon.
Yeah. Okay. Then. Okay. Dhanyabad.
Okay. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your evening.
And enjoy your morning.
Yes, I mean I'm so energized, you know.
And so
I'll
like,
probably do a little bit of work. Yeah.
Well, you can stick around with us. Like last night, I think we ended up staying up more than what we were supposed to. We had a party after. But say hi to your mom.
Oh, that sounds wonderful.
Say hi to your mom.
I will. Yeah. They're both in Pokhara, so I haven't seen them in a year and a half.
Oh, because of
COVID, I haven't seen them physically in a year and a half. Yeah, because of the COVID. And during our big festival, I was like, my parents were too scared for me to travel via air.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I just didn't go. I haven't seen them in a really long time. Though we talk every day. So we did, we did the video call, like, you know, I think we used Viber video calling to do our tika and stuff like that as well. So yeah, it was.
Okay, well, tell them that I send them my greetings. Give your mama a big hug.
I definitely will.
I still look up to her information anytime that I need to. A chancleta. I always greet her.
Yeah, once you send me a recording. Like, I mean, once I have access to this, I'll probably share it with them because both of them really like to, you know, be a part, like, I mean, you know, watch it. My dad is especially interested in what I have to talk about.
I know. Oh, yeah. So maybe
like, I always want to from you.
Yeah. So let's all give hearts so they can see it at the end as I stop the recording. Hi, Mom and Dad. Hi. Thank you for bringing into this world this amazing human being, Madhu. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. For you, Mama, bringing out, keeping this human in your womb for 9 months. Thank you. Dhanyabad. Love you, Madhu.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Yay, Madhu.